This is a Richmond, California story about Easter Hill Village. All right, so picture this. It's the 1940s in Richmond, California. The shipyards were hiring everyone that they can get their hands on. And families were moving from everywhere. Black families from the South, Latino families from Texas and Mexico, Japanese Americans, and even people from the Midwest. Basically, Richmond was like, if you got a heartbeat, we gonna hire you, okay? Obviously, getting a job like that now is nowhere easy as it was back then. People came with suitcases, a skillet, and maybe even a kid or two hanging off their arm. And yes, there were kids running wild in the streets while their moms was like, don't touch that, and their dads were working 12-hour shifts at the shipyards. Life was really tough for them, okay? But they had a lot of hope. Now, the government, on the other hand, had to house all these workers, and they had to do it fast. But here's the thing. The government built temporary housing all over Richmond to handle the flood of workers, but not everyone got an equal shot. Maps, redlining, and sneaky policies basically pushed Black families into certain areas first. Now, it wasn't official segregation, or at least not the ones that you see in brochures. But in practice, yeah, that's exactly what it looked like. Families were crammed into small apartments, limited resources, long waits for anything decent, while white families got more options. Black families got what was left. And of course, living conditions were rough. Tension was high. People were stressed, frustrated, and exhausted. Arguments broke out, tempers flared, and sometimes it even turned into violence. People were struggling, people were stressed, and they had limited resources. Kids grew up seeing how the system could push you down before you could even have the chance to get up. And there wasn't much support. Neighbors were struggling to survive. With that being said, with high tension and nowhere to turn to for help, it is a no-brainer that this would obviously turn into violence, fights, because stress levels are high. Through the roof. It was like they wanted us to fight, and they wanted us to fight for our lives and as well as each other. So eventually, Easter Hill Village comes into place. The government needed permanent housing fast for families displaced when temporary wartime and housing was torn down. And they didn't just throw up any random apartment. They actually did it thoughtfully. They had a little bit of space. They had front yards. They tried to make it cute. Now, Easter Hill Village was the first development in California to combine planned community design with individual units. It sounds fancy, huh? Okay, so it looked like a real neighborhood instead of a brick box, but because of the housing systems and hidden agendas, most of the residents ended up being Black, okay? A neighborhood shaped by policy, but not choice. So life here was not perfect. Crowded conditions, limited resources, systemic stress caused tension and sometimes fights. The design itself, while innovative, also highlighted the inequalities. So instead of the government looking out for us, we had to look out for each other, one another. We had to try to build trust fast and find ways to survive in a system that was not on our side or even meant for us. So Easter Hill Village shaped the mindset of the community before the church even came into the picture. And now in the middle of the struggle, the community needed a lifeline. Not a fancy building, just a place where people could breathe. Neighbors said, we just need a place to pray, to find some guidance, to get us through this mess. They started in a tiny apartment, the home of Jones and Maddie Mann, known as the Little Brown House at 30th and Hoffman. Now, some people brought their own chairs. Chairs was borrowed from everywhere. Kids were half asleep on laps. Neighbors packed in shoulder to shoulder. Honey, they was serious about their church. They weren't doing no playing. Now, the name Easter Hill comes from the rolling hill nearby, where the first sunrise service was held, a symbol of hope. Later, the church ended up moving down the street to 3911 Cutting Blvd, and with the first service in the new building on Christmas in 1957. Now, church wasn't optional. Grannies would roll their eyes if you even thought about skipping church. And after grueling shipyard weeks, dealing with crowded apartments and tension, church was a life support. It was like therapy. It was guidance, safety, and community. And yes, a little gossip too, because you know. But church gave families something steady to lean on. Faith, hope, and a little sanity and dignity in a world that was stacked against them. Now, Easter Hill didn't just stay local. Leaders like Rev. Booker T. Anderson turned it into a hub for social justice. Civil rights rallies, communities organizing, it was buzzing. And Dr. Martin Luther King came to Richmond. And yes, he came to Easter Hill Church, not just to preach, but to organize, inspire, and empower. Families who had squeezed into tight apartments by systemic policies, who've been pushed down by hidden agendas, got a vision of hope and action. Now, that day in 1961, the church wasn't just a place to pray when Martin Luther King came. It was a place to plan, speak out, and feel hope in action. Martin Luther King encouraged people to demand fair housing, equality, and dignity. For a community shaped by design to struggle, his words were like fuel for change. And now the church at Cutting Blvd is bigger, brighter, and still standing strong. Same mission, faith, and family. Today, Easter Hill carries the legacy forward. Richmond's CDF Freedom School teaches literacy, leadership, and social justice to kids, all for free. They even offer mentorships, community support, family programs, and the church is still a lifeline. They have the same heart, just a different century. From the chaos of housing and segregation, to families leaning on one another, to a church that became a beacon, Easter Hill United Methodist Church still tells the story of resilience, community, and survival in Richmond. And that's why families relied on it back then, why grannies went out every Sunday, and why it still matters today.